Hi, welcome to this episode. In this episode, I'm going to talk about my first job in New York and how, from that job, I think over a period of 2 years, I think about in 2 years, I quit the job and I got onto a path of real estate. So, as I told you, I got this. We moved to that London Terrace apartments, where Shirley was already born in Urbana, Champaign, and we had moved there. And in the London Terrace apartments was Jennifer, my second daughter, was born, and after that, I will tell you the sequence. Jeff, we had bought a house, and after we moved to the house, Jeffrey was born. So when we moved to New Jersey, this was in London Terrace Apartments. My commute was about a 50 minutes to an hour's drive on the bus, and every morning I used to take that bus and then come back in the evening. Uh, and I used to put in a lot of hours. It was the first year. I have to get my green card, so I wanted to impress my boss. So I used to work crazy hours. Like I used to go in, leave around home around 8 o'clock, be there at 9, and then sometimes leave the office at 9 p.m. I used to put 12-hour shifts, and I had my wife and my one child at home, and I would hardly spend any time with them during the weekdays. So weekends was our only time. One of the early things I remember from those days was Shanti's cousin was Felix Sebastian, and his wife Lily happens to be my distant cousin. They were living in Boston. They had two children who are both doctors now. Then they used to come to our house quite often, and we used to go to Atlantic City, which was about an hour's drive, hour and a half maybe, drive from our place, Sayreville, because they used to be crazy of casinos. And I started going with them, and I also got, in a mild way, addicted to casino. And Felix and I would play blackjack, and Shanti and Lily were on the slot machines. And in fact, there are so many days we have taken Shirley, who was only like, wow, she used to be what, less than 2 years before Jenny was born. We used to even take her, and those days the casinos were not too friendly for the children, and there was hardly any space. There used to be just one small arcade for the kids. So most of the time, Shanti and Lily and maybe sometimes myself, we used to babysit, look after Shirley. So make her go sit in the arcade where the car is thing, and she likes to just, of course, we don't put money, and they would do that. So being an hour's drive from home, we would leave in the after lunch, play there all night, and then around 10 o'clock we used to come back home. And then, in fact, even later, maybe even by midnight. So we would all sleep. Sometimes we have played even till 3 and 4 in the morning, because the casinos were 24 hours. And we with Shirley, imagine a 2-year-old girl, baby, we would wake up the next morning, and by then Shanti would have made lunch and all. So we would have said, okay, we'll eat our lunch, and then during lunch again, the casino bug would bite us again and say, so what's the plan for today? Everybody would say, I guess there's no plan. So we would say, why don't we go back to the casino? And most of the time Shanti would say, no, she's not coming, and she would stay at home with Shirley. So the three of us, Felix, Lily and myself, we used to go right after lunch. We used to leave 2 o'clock, and then we used to come by about again midnight. And their 2 boys were also there with them, and they used to come with us to play in the arcades or stay at home with Shanti. And we would play. They will come at midnight. We'll go to sleep, and the next day was Sunday. So again we would repeat the same thing. So they used to come from Boston on Friday nights. So Saturday was the first day, where after lunch we left, we played, and then Sunday morning we woke up and we wanted to go again. We'll go back, and then they'll come back and sleep at midnight or something, because the next morning they wanted to leave by 3 or 4. It was crazy. So they used to leave around 4, and it was about a 4-hour drive to their place, Burlington, Massachusetts, which was before Boston, maybe about half an hour or an hour before Boston, after we passed the Connecticut border. So that was our casino experience. And of course after that, I did a lot of blackjack. And after my son was born, Jeffrey and I started playing seriously. In fact, both of us even used to take part in professional gambling blackjack tournaments. I don't think we made anything big in it. So on the family side, after that, Jenny was born. And when Jenny was born, it was very funny, because around night 12 o'clock, I think Shanti got her pains. So we went and left Shirley in Ramesh Rao's place. As I told you, they had moved into the London Terrace apartments. We left Shirley there. We said, I have to take Shanti to the hospital. And they were very nice people. They would babysit Shirley anytime. Their daughter Nina was about maybe a teenager actually. She was in high school, and she used to play with Shirley a lot. And so I took Shanti, she was really in a lot of pain. The water had broken, and the hospital was kind of in an island or across from the mainland. There was some kind of a backwaters which had a bridge on it. And because New Jersey, there were a lot of boats and small ships going by, that was a drawbridge. And we go there, and of course, to our dismay, the drawbridge was open. So we had to wait almost like 20 minutes, and Shanti was in real pain. She said, oh my God, I think the baby is coming out any time. But then the drawbridge closed, and then from there it was like maybe 2 miles to the hospital. I think the town was near Sayreville, on the other side of Woodbridge. I forget the name. So we go to the hospital. I take her to the emergency and then admit her, the usual procedure. And I think Jenny was born within half an hour. Now, had that drawbridge got stuck or delayed, then Jenny would have born in the car. we might have named her Caprice maybe, because that was a Caprice Classic car that I had bought in Urbana, Champaign. And at the time when Jenny was born, my mother had come again to help us out with the pregnancy, and along with her was her very good friend Tangam. Tangam auntie, we call her Tangam auntie. She was a warden of Miranda House in Delhi, where I used to come from Pilani and stay with her for a couple of days. And she had, I think, just retired. So she and my mother, they came straight to New Jersey to help us out. And after the baby was born, they were planning to go on a trip to Europe, which they did. So while they were here, a day before Jenny was born, because we didn't think the baby was going to come for another week. So we decided to send them to Washington, D.C., where was another cousin of Shanti, Rita, and her husband Robert Nathan. Robert is from Bombay, and Rita was from Singanallur, an outskirts of Coimbatore. And so we sent my mom and Tangam auntie there, and that's when Jenny was born. And since we handled it in this country, it's the husband who's in the hospital. Even the grandparents are not allowed till even to carry the baby those days. So I didn't want to bother them and break their visit to Washington, D.C. They were going around the Smithsonian and all that stuff. And they came after 2-3 days, and I remember my mom was very mad with me. How come? You should have told us. We would have come immediately. I said there was really nothing to do in this country. You cannot help until we come back from the hospital. That's when we may need all the help. So that was the story of Jenny's birth. And on the family front, the next thing was the purchase of the house. About an hour south of Sayreville on Route 9, and just where it intersected with 195. 195 used to come from Philadelphia to this place and went up to Atlantic City. We wanted to buy a house, and those days your dreams are big. So new homes were being built. Those areas were just coming up. So we found a house which we bought for about 100,000. It was a brand new construction, under construction. The work had not started. So we had put down $5,000 and signed up for the house, and the house was going to be ready for another 8 months or 9 months. So our house was being built, and we used to go every weekend, and when they were putting up the frames, of course there was no construction going on during weekends, so we used to go and write all our names on the frames. Of course after that it was going to be covered with the drywall, we wouldn't see it, but that was the house. So we bought it for 100,000, and right after that I quit my job, and I'll tell you about my job in detail next. And in that house, after a year, Jeffrey was born, and when Jeffrey was born, Shanti's mom came from Coimbatore to help us out. And we being a new house, we had put a fence with my neighbor. They shared the cost. I remember buying a play set for the kids, a slide and swings. and I was so crazy those days. I assembled the entire thing that same afternoon I had bought it. I think we had bought it from Toys R Us or something like that. So put it up, and the children, Jenny and Shirley. Jenny was still really young. Shirley was the one who would play in it, and Shirley went to her first school at that time. And there was another Indian couple, three Indians we were very close with. They were in the next street. One was a guy called Manohar. He was an Andhra person, and he had a weakness. He used to keep talking all the time. Even if there are 10 people in the room in a party, you would only hear him because he will keep on talking and he will not listen to anybody. So nobody could talk. That was his weakness. They didn't have children, I think. Then next to him was a person called Vijay Mehra and his wife Meera, I think. Vijay and Mehra. Excellent, excellent couple. They didn't have a child when they moved in, but after that, subsequently, she got pregnant and they had their first child there. And across from Manohar and Vijay's house was Raghavan and I think Maithili. Raghavan and Maithili. They were from Karnataka. So they were very much of a Sai Baba Bhakta, and she used to make excellent vegetarian food. So we used to meet among ourselves practically at least twice a month, weekends, potluck. That was the Indian culture at that time. Our world was limited to the Indians in the neighborhood, and every other week or once a month there would be a potluck in one person's house. So all of us would cook food and go take it and then share it. And the men, of course, would drink, get drunk. The ladies would all be sitting and chatting, watching TV, movie, and all the kids would be playing. So the kids would all play and get to know each other. And that, again, Lily and Felix used to even come to our Howell house. And from there, in fact, it was closer. The Atlantic City was only about an hour. So it made it more convenient. But for them to come from Boston, Burlington, and go back was an extra hour each way. But oh my God, we did that at least once a month. They came. And then we used to go back up to their place quite often and, spend the weekend. We used to leave on Friday evening and then come back on Monday early morning we used to leave. So that's how our social life was. The office work, as I told you, I got this job with the company name was Reiner Planning Services. It was owned by Bob Reiner. He was a very, very sharp, intelligent person. He was also a coder. And he had hired me after Naveen Sharma had left the job. So I was a direct recruitment. I was so happy to get that first job. My starting salary was $24,000. Oh my God, after making 400, 500 a month as a student, stipend, suddenly making 2,000 a month, of course, taxes was 100, 200 bucks. We used to get paid every week or every week, I think, or 2 weeks. So that was my first experience. And I told you that I used to work crazy hours there. And Bob used to be another person who worked. And then we had a common secretary called Tina. She was a young Italian girl. Her mother used to be I guess their housekeeper and au pair in their house in Connecticut. And Tina was her daughter. So we were only three of us in the office. And after seeing me work so hard and long hours, slowly Bob decided to stay back home most of the days. He would come only like maybe once a week to give the checks and all that stuff. And the entire burden was on me. He used to do the work, some work from home. And then he used to call me and say, like, guess where I am? I am in beautiful country club in Connecticut, golfing. So he used to give me instructions, okay, do this, do this, do that. And I was a very dedicated soul, really, really. And in fact, at one point, we used to work, those days were only mainframes. We didn't have personal computers. Personal computers didn't start appearing till the mid-80s, really. So we used to rent computer time in Boston area. And we used to work remotely with those modems, that one that when you try to dial up, we had to dial up through a regular phone and connect it to a modem, which used to make like, those funny sound, something it would do, and then the lights would all come up and we know it's connected. And meanwhile, we would have developed we used to used mostly COBOL and PL1, and it used to be sent there, and within a minute or two we would cut off the phone, because those days long distance phones were so expensive. I don't remember what, but maybe it was $1 a minute we had to pay for long distance from New York to Boston or anywhere. And that was my training, really hard training with the COBOL and PL1. And Rainer, of course, was the one who got all the projects, and I used to execute them. And I developed a very good contact. He was a very good friend of mine till today, Gary Beck, who incidentally officiated the marriage with Rani in 2013. So there was a advertising agency. So we used to do work for advertising agencies, who in turn got projects from various companies, big companies like Time Magazine, Coca-Cola, American Express, and all those things. And we used to be their software developers or computer guys. So I met Gary Beck there. He used to work, that company was called, I think, ad agency WRK, Wonderman, Ricotta and Klein. They were one of the top three, with Thomson and Thomson, Campion or something. So I used to meet Gary. In fact, most of the days he used to go sit in their office and then get the work done. Gary and I used to be also sometimes drink buddies. I remember one day we went to a bar after finishing a project, and we got so drunk. We had these frozen margaritas, and I've never had a margarita, and that was like heaven for me those days. So I think I must have had about 8 to 10 each of us. And remember, I had to after that go and walk up to Port Authority on the other end of Manhattan, and then take a bus, an hour's drive to Sayreville. So, and then I think Gary puked or something, and he lived in the city. So I think he kind of called his wife from there and told her that Bonnie is his wife, who was a nurse, to come and pick him up from the bar, and he literally was passed out. So Bonnie came and took him, and then I left. And then by the time I reached my apartment in Sayreville, it was midnight. So that was my experience with Gary. And then after about 2 years, I decided that meanwhile the real estate, we are talking about maybe 1984. Real estate was so hot that you hear stories of, oh, I just bought the house for 100,000 and the next week I sold it for 125,000. And although my salary had gone up to about, from 24 I started, within 2 years my boss, Bob Reiner, saw what I was contributing, and my salary had increased to 45,000. But still I used to look at all these guys in real estate and say, my God, this guy just comes back and says over a weekend he made 25,000, 50,000. And I said, I am in the wrong field. We all had come to America to make money. So the one thing good with Bob Reiner in our company was, because he and his wife were the only employees, and Tina was there and I was the third guy. They had a pension system, and they used to contribute 25% of our salaries to the pension fund. And if we were there for 2 years, we get what is called vested. So in end of 2 years, I was vested with about $30,000, which was supposed to be about 20. It is 25%, I think, or 30%. And I said, and then the real estate was getting hot. And I said, maybe I'm in the wrong field. I should go and venture out and see. So one fine day, I told my boss I'm quitting. He was shocked. He was literally shocked. He said, why, do you want more pay or this or that? I said, no, the reason is real estate. Real estate is beckoning me, and I see money being made left and right. So what I'm making here in a year, I could probably make there in a couple of months. So, please let me go. So I left and I took that $30,000 that I was vested. And then I started my real estate career there. I had one of the things we used to do was, in a new subdivision which they are building, like I had bought my house. There was a place called Cherry Hill. I remember I bought a house there. We used to go sign up, pay $5,000, and they would build the house. It was a $100,000 house. It was ready in 6 months. And of course, I had no intention of moving into that house, although it was a nice house those days. But I found a realtor to list my property as soon as the house was ready. I assigned my contract to a new buyer, and I sold it for $150,000. I had to pay about 10,000 broker fees, real estate commission. So I walked out of it with $40,000 in just that one deal with a $5,000 investment. And another of my investments that I want to talk about here is I teamed up with a guy called Vijay Gupta, who was really a wheeler dealer, a snake oil salesman. But I learned from him, what he used to do was, he did 2 projects. He used to buy the run-down homes and get it fixed up and then rent them and apply for a mortgage and get some cash flow out of it, plus it was such that it was positive cash flow every month. Positive cash flow meaning, for those who don't know, the mortgage payment and all the expenses is taken out of the rent money, property tax, insurance, and what is left over is called the positive cash flow. So following that, I had this $30,000 with me from my pension, vested funds. I bought a rundown house for $15,000, and I spent another $15,000 to renovate it, and a lot of things had to be fixed, new appliances and this and that. That's how you get these run-down homes where literally you have to go and give a total new facelift. So we fixed it, and I was able to rent it. I don't know, those days about maybe $700 or something. And I got a mortgage of about, I think it was valued at $60,000. I bought it for 15. I put in 15, so it was $30,000 I had spent, and it was assessed at 60,000. So they gave me 80% of that. So I got about a $48,000 mortgage. So I had made $18,000 cash within like 2 months. And then I rented it out, and I used to get a cash flow, positive cash flow of about $100 or something. And that's around the time, I had made so much quick money in all these real estate deals. And then Jeffrey was also born meanwhile. And around 1987 early, we decided to make the move to India because, as I told you earlier in my story, I never wanted to come to the US. I was never enamored by US. So I wanted to go back. I had that bug in me. I said I want to go to India and really start fresh and build something. So I had, already got quite an amount of cash. I think close to $1 million those days, and so decided that we will leave. So I kind of wrapped up my. After I left, the other thing I forgot to say is I had a good understanding with Gary Beck, and he used to give me consulting assignments here and there. So I would get about 20 hours of assignment, and that was enough to put bread and butter on the table, and I would make this money, capital profits from my real estate venture. So we decided, so I wrapped down all that work, and finally I think by the end of 87 in October, we had left. And there's another interesting story. When we had bought the tickets, everything, and we had sold our house, the house that we had built new for 100,000, market was so crazy going up, we sold it for 200,000. So that was like $100,000 profit there. And the other thing that happened was we were sitting, we had sold the house. Closing was in another couple of days. We are watching the TV when that 1987 Black Thursday happened. The market crashed like anything. Of course, there was predicting a big recession and depression. But we had already sold the house, and then we went and closed on the home. Then my mother was there with us. So with my mother, I had sent all the 3 children. I think all 3, along with there was another friend of ours. His wife was also going to India. So my mother and that lady with the 3 children. Shirley was 5 or 6, and Jenny was like 4, and Jeffrey was about maybe 2 years old. So they took them. We had sent them, and after we sent them, we come back home from the airport. And I get a call from my friend Vijay Gupta in that real estate deal. And he said, first thing he asked me is, Iggy, do you have insurance on that rental house you did? Yeah, sure, I have insurance. I said, what happened? He said, the house burnt down. So next morning, the adjuster came. I had to go there. He assessed, and he declared it was total destruction, full value. So I got $60,000 from the insurance, and out of that I paid off my mortgage 48,000, and I got another 12,000 cash. So earlier I had made about the cash out. I had made 18,000. Then I made here, another after mortgage another 12 to 15,000, and that's how my real estate career in the U.S. ended. Selling our house, buying for 100, selling for 200, and this burnt down house.